Welcome to Soltron. Today we're going to compare the third-party Commander of Stars against the 1996, I think, leader class Optimus Prime that I customized, and we'll see which one holds up better. Okay, here's a 360 view of the original figure. And actually, I was way off. This guy's from 2005. I was like a whole decade off. But you can see he holds up pretty good. He's got fairly good proportions. I worked on making his legs longer and his torso a little bit longer. So I'd say overall, I'm still really pleased with the way this guy looks. I would say he's like an 8. Really enjoy his wing pack. He's a little stumpy, and he's very blocky and powerful looking, which I don't mind. And we compare that to the Commander of Stars from 2023. And this guy's just a lot sleeker looking. He's less blocky. Everything, his proportions just flow together a little bit better. And he's got really excellent proportions. His head doesn't look too big. Having a small head actually makes him look more powerful. The legs are like long but not lanky. Everything just looks really good on this guy. They lengthened everything. Like the cannons are longer, the wings are longer. Everything's just been like stretched out a little bit so he doesn't look stumpy. He's got a long torso too. Like this guy, let's face it, this guy's like a 10. He's pretty much a perfect looking robot. There's just, aesthetically, there's just nothing wrong with him. So clearly the robot mode, like he wins, hands down. And we can check out how these guys scale with the 2022 Starscream, and they just, neither of them are in scale with this figure like at all. They should not be towering way over him, but they both look pretty good. Definitely the aesthetic is really well matching. And just because I've got him out, I haven't put him back in the display shelf. Let's look at my custom Titan tidal wave. So they come up to a little bit higher than where a knee would naturally be. So they look pretty good together. And then here we can get a good look at their side by side. So you can see like the torso section of the Commander of Stars is just a lot cleaner than this section, which just has a bunch of extra parts. It's kind of clunky looking. And then the wings help just make this guy look a lot sleeker. He's got like this backpack behind his head, which makes him look a little clunkier. The leg guns are a lot thicker on the original figure and more sleek on the new one. One thing I do prefer from the original figure is that these fists are just nice and chunky compared to these like tiny little spindly little hands. I don't really like that at all. I like when the hands are about the same size as the head. But yeah, there's a lot of differences. The head kind of, for the original figure, is just kind of not very proportional. It's very big compared to the body, and I think this guy just pulls it off so much better with his smaller head, smaller face. It just looks a lot more intimidating. And let's take some time to talk about like what I've done to this original figure, because there's a lot. So I gave him ball jointed wrists so he can actually articulate his hands. That was something the original figure did not have at all. So he didn't have wrist articulation. His hands were just bolted into this panel. And that also makes his forearms a little bit bigger because the original figure had very tiny forearms, which hurt his proportions a lot. And then I made it so that these shoulder pads could angle up a little bit more, because I think on the original figure it could only go like this high. So you can see this makes it, and this makes his arms look a little bit longer. I gave him a ball joint neck, which disabled his mask gimmick, unfortunately, but I prefer that he be able to look around. Let's see. I also like lengthened his torso, so I added like all this section, and this is just all like this apron kind of piece that just pegs into his crotch. Another thing I added was, I saw somebody else did this, was I gave him like toe articulation so that his feet could be flat on the ground. So that's all it does, is it just pivots his toe. It's really not that fancy, but it does make a difference. So it looks like he does have ankle articulation. Let's see. I think that's all the big things. I also gave him, if you open up his chest section, I gave him like the MP matrix from like the original Masterpiece Prime. I think the MP1 actually. So it's pretty gigantic. And it's not meant to go in his chest, so it's pretty hard to get it out. It's really wedged in there. All right, so now you can see this matrix, and this is the cool one that like opens up. So probably the nicest matrix, as far as I know, that's been made. And it's really cool that he can actually like hold it and open it with his hands. There we go. So you can actually like hold the matrix. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm still attached to this old figure. I've customized this guy so many times and made new ones and then had to buy new ones and start over because I just made dumb mistakes. And I just really like how this guy came along. One thing that's kind of a weakness of this figure is his windows are very floppy. I really don't like how those feel, but every other part of his body feels pretty good. So let's go on to like the quality. Is his shoulders, though, the ratchets in these did disintegrate over time, so now he does not have shoulder ratchets, but there's enough tension in here that his arms just work fine anyway. But he does have these outward motion, which is very limited by the shoulder. He does have like 90 degrees in the elbow, maybe a little bit more than 90 degrees. He does have his ball joint wrist, which we talked about. He doesn't have hip swivel. His hip skirts move up. That's another thing I customized so that he can get like 90 degrees in his knee. He's got full outward. And this is the original universal joints. So that these still work after all this time is pretty nice. And then he's got like soft ratchets in the hips, but good enough to keep this giant foot up. So that's not bad. And then you saw the ankle articulation earlier, and then he's got his thigh swivel, bicep swivel. Not on any ratchets or anything, they're just on friction. So that's pretty much all his articulation. And with that, you can still get some pretty good poses out of him. He does have, I added like this barrel to his cannon just to make it look a little bit longer, because in the show, these cannons were very long. But let's get him in a good pose. All right, and here he is firing both his cannons pretty much. So that's a pretty cool pose you can get, and you can just articulate these leg cannons, get those up. So that's pretty good for a figure that's like 20 years old. So he's got some decent posability. And then he does have one gimmick, which is a little bit lame, but it's with this cannon is battery operated. And I'm surprised it still works after all these years. There's a button on the side, you just press that. Then you get lights and sounds, so the sounds are like in a speaker back here, and then this lights up, and you get 2 AAA batteries. And we can use actually Commander of Stars, Cybertron Planet Key, and we can put that into the cannon, and that will make it open up and make that sound. So that's kind of cool. And then when you press the button, you get a new sound. You get like a more intimidating blast effect. So not much to it considering how many batteries you have to put in it and how much it weighs him down. It's a little bit excessive. All right, let's switch over to Commander of Stars. As you saw in my last video, I did a lot of customizing on this guy to fix him and make him stable and make him more, I don't know, make this a more fair competition. But otherwise, if I hadn't done any of the fixes on this guy definitely loses in terms of quality. The original figure still holds up. It's nice and strong. Plastic all feels good. This guy's plastic feels a little bit thin in places, and I was able to cut it with just a hobby knife. I didn't even need to use a Dremel sometimes. So his plastic is definitely softer, not as hard as that old school plastic. But he's also got die cast in him, so he's very heavy. So he definitely feels premium, even though his ratchets kind of suck. I would actually prefer that he not have die cast, but he'd probably be more likely to fall backwards too. He's got such a huge backpack. And one negative about this guy is you can't really open his chest while these straps are deployed. It's just, they just get in the way. Like this one's not a problem because mine was defective and this strap is actually wrong. But you can see, so his chest can open up. His gimmicks are actually a lot cooler. So you take the Cybertron key and it's got a magnet on it, and you just wave it in front of the thing you're activating. So that lights up his chest matrix, which is very cool. And if you press it again, you get like this pulsing effect. Very nice. And then for his cannons, same thing. This one is now lit up. So you can get a flashing effect. The barrel's also lighting up. And then you can slow down the flashing, and then you can just make it solid. And then same thing with his pistol. You just wave the matrix over it, or the planet key. You can't really see that. So let's go ahead and get him into a pose. So we'll just get his cannons facing down. And another negative about this figure is his cannon articulation is really awkward. I think maybe they did that just to make it so he can pose better. But you can see this is like flashing. You can slow it down to a slower flash. And then you can just get solid on. Very cool. And then this cannon just looks a lot cooler. It's so much bigger, but it doesn't have any spring-operated gimmick, which is fine. One thing this figure added, which is like very superior to my custom figure, is that these cannons actually do have handles, and after you prop them up, the handles actually do slide back and forth to take into account where he's posing. So that's really good engineering, is they just slide up and then they're going to slot. So really well done on the team as far as that goes. And then you're going to, like, these cannons have like this extra bit of articulation, so we can just have them posed even more forward. And then you got to try to wrap his arms around here, which is really difficult if you didn't do the wrist mod, but now that I have modded wrists, you can definitely grab his handles a lot better. So I'll go ahead and pose him up. Okay, and here we have Commander of Stars holding his guns. It's kind of a hassle to get them in the right position, and then the handles do have a little slot or a little tab that slots into his palm, so you kind of have to have it in the perfect position, but then he can hold it nice and securely, so that is a bonus. But it's just kind of a hassle to wrap his fingers around the handles. It's all kind of annoying. Definitely helps to have both of his bicep articulation unlocked, or both of his elbow articulation, and to have his wrist articulation. You can see they're both clicked, like one click on the wrist, but then you get pretty good pose out of him. So it's all kind of worth it in the end, but he is a lot more fiddly. So as far as articulation goes, I'd say these figures are kind of tied. I would actually give this guy a penalty because his articulation, you have to customize him to unlock most of it. So this guy, I would say, loses for articulation, to be honest, than the original figure. Both of these figures are pretty heavy, but let's look at Commander of Stars. He weighs about 41 ounces when he's all loaded up. And then our original custom, Galaxy Force Optimus Prime, he weighs 32 ounces, so he's like 1/4 lighter, or like he weighs 3/4 what Commander of Stars weighs pretty much, and that's pretty much thanks to all this die cast. That's pretty impressive considering this guy does not have metal in him. Alright, let's move on. Let's go ahead and take off their backpacks and look at some other modes they have. So you just, for the original, you just raise the straps, and this is just going to pull out right out the back. Good design. Comes out without any fuss. And then the remake figure, unfortunately, I had to customize this guy. So same thing, straps now go up. And then, might as well do this one even though it doesn't really do anything. And then you just pull it out his back. So pretty easy to get his off now too. The original figure does not do that. Get this guy ready for his battle station trailer. We're just going to pull off his calves. And then we're just going to transform this guy into his small mode, which just means folding in his feet behind his calves. And then just folding these like that, basically. And then just orienting his shoulder pads to make his arms look a little bit smaller. That's basically all you do for this guy. Okay, and for our original figure, we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to rip off his calves. They're just held in with this and this tab down here. So they just come right off. And then same thing, we just lower his shoulder guards and then close up his antenna. And then basically we just flip this around to the back. I removed his feet, which was kind of like too much hassle to peg back in together. But same thing, these will just go up to the back of his calves. All right, and here's a look at both the battle trailers together. So you can see they both become like gun emplacements, which is pretty cool. Again, I had to customize my figure in order to get these turrets to face the right way. but it's a cool little feature. This one looks pretty good. I think in some ways being so long and lanky actually works against this one. I think this one looks a little bit more intimidating. So I actually prefer the look of the original battle trailer. I think that actually looks cooler. Here we can compare the two short mode robots. So the original figure actually gets significantly shorter. This guy gets just a little bit shorter because his platform shoes don't add that much height to him. So he actually looks a lot more like the original figure. This guy looks, I think, more of a transformation. He also kind of reminds me of Optimus Primal because now his arms are just gigantic. But of course, I'd say the Commander of Stars just pulls it off a little bit better than our original Optimus Prime. And of course, he can do the extra thing where you can face rotate and give him his original face, which pulls off this mode even better. And this guy, his mouthpiece is not going to come off. I've glued that on there. So I'd definitely give the short mode to the Commander of Stars, even though it looks a lot like his tall mode. There's not much going on. Oh, and one extra thing you can do on the original figure is you just click his legs over, and that might make his legs look a little bit more proportional to his stocky body, maybe not. And then if you look at the back of these guys, his is not pretty clean. I had to put a lot of extra joints there for his transformation. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but he's got like a cleaner back area. So of course, yeah, Commander of Stars just looking really good and clean. And here they are manning their gun emplacements. And I think this one just scales better with this figure, maybe because he's a little bit smaller. This looks like it would actually defend him a little bit. And this just like goes up, not even to his knees. So it's kind of just on the ground. So I think this just scales with the original figure a little bit better, but I think they both look good. And then his cannon I kind of made a little bit too long for this mode, but oh well. Let's go into a mode that is not an official mode, but it's always been one of my favorite fan modes, is like the jet sled. I don't know what you would call this, but basically you get like the whole trailer and it can just convert into like this kind of mobile weapons attachment or platform, which is kind of like the truck flight mode in a lot of ways. This one's kind of annoying because the cannons don't all face forward. This one just holds together a lot better. Everything's nice and sturdy. The ratchets in the wings work, which helps out a lot. And it's nice and sturdy, so that means, and then all the cannons are going to be pointed forwards. And what's really cool is then you can get your short Optimus Prime and he can just ride on this. All right, and there we have Optimus Prime like riding on his platform. I think the original, it just works a little bit better just because it's got so much more foot space. This one, you got to very carefully balance everything. Nothing's really pegging together. It's all kind of floppy and wobbly, but I don't know. I've just always really enjoyed this fake mode. Finally, I'm going to go into the two vehicle modes, and I'm not going to transform these figures on camera because that's not going to be fun for anybody, but I do want to point out like how my custom is different than the original. So one thing you do is you fold up this whole apron section, and then this is tabbed in here. Oh yeah, and another thing I want to point out is that the wheels on this guy actually kind of fold into his abs, whereas the Commander of Stars, you just have these as a skirt, unfortunately. It would have been cool if these would have just then folded back up, like inside out, and then became his abs. So I do like that mine actually hides the wheels a little bit more. But anyway, you get those kind of out of the way. And then this whole section now, instead of just having the legs rotate forward, this whole section comes unpegged, and now there's this metal joint. And that's basically going to allow his whole section to fold forward. So I'll get these two transformed. All right, while I'm transforming them, here's the custom matrix for my figure, and then here's the Commander of Stars one. And then let's just do the magnet gimmick. Oh, it's on the other side. So very cool gimmick. And the matrices look pretty similar. They both look really good. Let's look at the two figures in vehicle mode. So one thing I told you about in the original figure was that these side windows, chest windows, are very wobbly. In the Commander of Stars, they actually feel very nice and secure. So that is definitely an improvement as opposed to these windows, which just feel like they're barely even holding on. They're just very wobbly. They don't feel great. So these feel much better. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. A thing that's like a negative on the Commander of Stars is that you got this ugly gap behind the calf. I don't even know if that was necessary. That seems kind of unnecessary because the original figure does not have that. It's just nice and clean back there. One thing about my custom that's kind of gnarly is because of this new joint. These set of wheels actually do not lay on the ground flat. I could probably customize that by just making these a little bit longer, but I don't know. I don't really care that much. I feel like everything else he does is really good. And then like a negative for the original figure was that he's just got like a visible head hanging out back here. So obviously the truck of the Commander of Stars just looks better overall. The cab is like a little bit smaller. I think because the truck is so long, I think it actually looks better with a longer cab. It kind of makes better proportion. But this is like a more realistic looking truck mode, even though it's kind of stumpy too. So I'd say the truck mode on this guy is a little bit better. They both have the same issue where you can't really pick them up by the cab because they'll get floppy. Actually, this guy's okay, but not when his trailer's on. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And here they both are in fire truck mode. So they both look pretty similar. The Commander of Stars again. He looks a little bit more stretched out just because everything's a little bit shorter, low hanging. This guy's got like a higher, I don't know what you call that. He's just got higher clearance. So this guy looks a little bit stumpier, but overall I'd say the trucks are pretty similar. Of course, this truck is nice and clean. This one's got just a little bit more toy aesthetic. It's very chunky looking. I would definitely say that the Commander of Stars is the cooler looking fire truck mode. Mine does have one extra little secret gimmick where the fire truck can actually peg on closer to the cab. And in this case, I would say actually my custom figure looks a little bit cooler. Everything's just more condensed. He's not so stretched out looking, unlike this figure, which is kind of stretched out. It's got a big gap behind the cab. My figure just doesn't have that look. He just looks like a lot more aggressive, probably because the cab's also tilted forward a little bit. He just looks like, definitely not cleaner because he's got a lot more greebles, but I just prefer the look of this because it just has less wasted space. And then if we go into the flight mode, all you have to do is just pull out the wings on this guy, rotate them, and then point the cannons forward. And there you go. He's already in flight mode. And then you can see his flight mode looks decent. It doesn't look like it could actually fly, mind you, but it looks okay. And you got this big gap in the back, which is nice to hide with these cannons. But you got like a decent looking flight mode out of this figure, the original. And here we go with the Commander of Stars flight mode. It's not very convincing. Here you go. Here's a better look at both of them. So I just think mine just cleans up a little bit better. This one just looks gangly. These extra joints don't help the look at all, whereas everything looks more cohesive with the original figure. And then we'll put the trailer in the original position just to make it a little bit more fair. This one still looks better to me. It actually looks like it could fly. This is just not going to convince anybody. And then these guns, of course, are going to droop because that's just everything about this figure. Everything's just going to droop. But this does not look like a convincing space vehicle. This one looks like it could maybe be like some futuristic space vehicle, freighter or something. So overall, where does that leave us? I would say Commander of Stars is a great figure for the robot mode. And if you just put on a shelf, you don't like to play with your figures, this is probably a good way to go if you don't mind doing some customizing. If you do mind customizing and fixing the figure, then you should just never buy this figure. It's just a ripoff. If you like to pick up and play with your toys, then this is the guy who wins. This guy's very, you know that I like Korean robots. He's just got that aesthetic. He's very easy to pick up and play with. But this guy just looks so much cooler in his robot mode. And that's like the only thing that he kind of has over this figure, in my opinion, is that his robot mode is just so much better. It's like what I always dreamed of. Like after I bought this figure, I was very happy with him for a lot of years until I started customizing, and I've just always wanted a figure that looks like this. So for me, it's probably Commander of Stars just because of the robot mode, even though the original is just so much more fun to play with. So I hope that helped somebody else out or was entertaining at least, and I'll see you in the next one.